A desperate escape. The jungle was alive with danger. Thick, glowing vines hung from towering trees that seemed to touch the skies. Strange creatures scuttled through the shadows, their eyes glinting in the dim bioluminescent light. Commander Ethan gripped his rifle tightly as he signaled for his team to stay quiet. Behind him, 6 survivors moved cautiously, their breathing shallow, their faces pale with fear. Their ship had crashed 2 days ago, and the planet, known as Terith 7, was nothing like the peaceful exploration mission they had prepared for. Instead, it was a death trap. The Xeltrax, a ruthless alien race, had picked up their distress signal and were now hunting them down. Ethan's sharp blue eyes scanned the terrain ahead. His body moved with precision, every step calculated to avoid making noise. He glanced over his shoulder at the group. Dr. Amelia, a biologist, clutched a small case of samples, her hands trembling. Marcus, the ship's engineer, limped slightly from an injury he'd sustained during the crash. Beside him, young Mia, barely 18, and the youngest crew member, held onto her broken helmet like it was a lifeline. "We need to keep moving," Ethan whispered, his voice low but firm. The group nodded, their trust in him absolute. Ethan had always been a man of action, not words. He didn't comfort or console. He gave orders, and people followed. But even he felt the weight of their situation pressing down on him. Suddenly, a faint beeping sound came from Marcus's handheld scanner. Everyone froze. "What is it?" Ethan asked, his voice tense. Marcus swallowed hard. "Life forms. Heading this way. Fast." Panic rippled through the group. Amelia's eyes widened, and Mia let out a soft gasp. Ethan raised a hand to silence them. "How many?" "Too many," Marcus replied, his voice shaking. Ethan's mind raced. The jungle offered no real cover. The glowing plants seemed to light up wherever they stepped, making hiding almost impossible. The Xeltrax were known for their superior tracking abilities. Running would be futile. "Stay low," Ethan ordered. "Keep quiet. We'll figure this out." The group crouched behind a cluster of massive roots, their hearts pounding in unison. The sound of distant footsteps grew louder, echoing through the jungle. Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Then they heard it, a guttural, alien growl. The Xeltrax were close. Ethan could feel the fear radiating from his team. Mia clutched Amelia's arm, her knuckles white. Marcus's breathing grew ragged. Ethan knew they wouldn't survive if they panicked. "Focus," he whispered sharply. "We've been through worse." But had they? Ethan couldn't lie to himself. This wasn't just another battle. They were stranded, outnumbered, and outgunned on an alien world. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. It was almost worse than the noise. Ethan strained his ears, trying to pinpoint the Xeltrax's position. Suddenly, a high-pitched chirping sound cut through the air. It was a Xeltrax signal, a call to attack. Ethan's heart sank. "Move," he barked. The group sprinted through the jungle, crashing through glowing vines and dodging low-hanging branches. The Xeltrax were behind them now, their growls and screeches filling the air. Ethan fired his rifle blindly over his shoulder, hoping to slow them down. "Keep going," he shouted. Ahead, the jungle opened into a clearing. In the center stood a massive ancient tree with a hollow trunk. Ethan pointed to it. Inside, now, one by one, the survivors dove into the hollow tree. Ethan was the last to enter, pulling a vine across the opening to conceal their hiding spot. They crouched in the darkness, their breaths heavy and uneven. Outside, the Xeltrax arrived. Their footsteps were heavy, their guttural voices like a nightmarish song. Through a crack in the tree, Ethan saw them. Tall, muscular creatures with smooth black skin that shimmered in the faint light. Their glowing yellow eyes scanned the area, their sharp claws ready to strike. Ethan held his breath, motioning for the others to stay silent. The Xeltrax moved closer to the tree, their nostrils flaring as they sniffed the air. Ethan's finger hovered over the trigger of his rifle. If they were discovered, he would fight until his last breath. But before the aliens could investigate further, a strange sound echoed through the jungle. A soft, melodic hum. The cell tracks froze, their heads snapping toward the source of the sound. "What is that?" Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't know. The hum grew louder, filling the air with an otherworldly vibration. The cell tracks exchanged uneasy glances before retreating into the shadows, their growls fading into the distance. The survivors sat in stunned silence. Ethan's mind raced. What had driven the cell tracks away? The answer came moments later when a voice, calm and soothing, spoke through their comms. "I can help you," it said. "Trust me." Ethan's blood ran cold. It was an alien voice, soft, feminine, and completely unexpected. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low but firm. The voice paused before replying. "Someone who doesn't want to see you die." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Ethan's jaw tightened. They had no idea who, or what, they were dealing with. But one thing was certain. The rules of their survival had just changed. The mysterious ally. The group sat huddled in the hollow tree, their faces a mix of exhaustion and fear. Ethan's hand rested on his rifle, his sharp eyes scanning the small crack in their hiding place for any signs of movement. The jungle outside had grown eerily quiet, as though holding its breath. The voice came again, calm yet insistent. "I can lead you to safety, but you must move quickly. They'll return soon." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Who are you? Why are you helping us?" A pause. Then the voice replied, "My name is Lyra. I'm not like the others." The group exchanged uncertain glances. Marcus whispered, "Not like the others." That's not exactly reassuring. "She's one of them," Amelia muttered, clutching the biologist's case to her chest. "It's a trick, a trap." Ethan raised a hand to silence them. His instincts screamed not to trust the voice, but their options were limited. They couldn't stay in the tree forever. "Why should we trust you?" Ethan asked, his voice cold and measured. Lyra's voice softened, carrying an edge of urgency. "Because if you don't, you'll all be dead by sunrise. I know the jungle. I know the cell tracks. I can guide you through their hunting zones to a safe place." Ethan didn't like it. The last thing they needed was an alien promising salvation. But the memory of the Xeltrax's yellow eyes and sharp claws was still fresh in his mind. He turned to the group, his gaze sweeping over their frightened faces. "What do you think?" he asked, surprising them. Ethan was not known for asking opinions. Mia, her voice trembling but determined, said, "We don't have a choice. If she wanted to kill us, she wouldn't have scared them off." "She could be leading us straight into a trap," Marcus countered. "Or she could be our only chance." Maya shot back, her wide eyes meeting Ethan's. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. We move, but we stay alert. One wrong move, and I'll handle it." He activated his comms. "All right, Lyra. We'll follow you. But you try anything, and it'll be the last thing you do." A soft chuckle came through the comms. "Understood, Commander. Head east. I'll guide you." The group emerged from their hiding spot, the jungle's bioluminescent glow casting eerie shadows on their faces. Lyra's directions came calmly and clearly. "Turn left at the twisted tree with the orange flowers," she instructed. "Watch out for the blue vines. Their spores are toxic." The survivors moved cautiously, their trust in Lyra tenuous at best. Ethan took the lead, his weapon always at the ready. After nearly an hour of navigating the jungle, they came across a hidden entrance to a tunnel. It was carved into the base of a massive rock formation, overgrown with moss and vines. "In there," Lyra said. Ethan hesitated. The tunnel looked ancient and foreboding, its darkness swallowing the faint light from the jungle. "What's in there?" he asked. "Safety," Lyra replied. "And answers." Ethan gestured for the group to enter. He was the last to step inside, his eyes scanning the area one final time before disappearing into the shadows. The tunnel was unlike anything they'd seen before. The walls were smooth and lined with faintly glowing symbols, pulsating with a rhythmic light. Marcus ran his fingers over the carvings, his engineer's curiosity piqued. "This isn't Celtrax's work," he muttered. "It's older." Amelia knelt to examine the floor, where tiny blue crystals glimmered. "These are organic," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "Some kind of living material." Lyra's voice broke through their wonder. "You're standing in the ruins of a race that existed long before the Celtrax. They were peaceful, intelligent, and they were wiped out." Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened. "By the Celtrax." "Yes," Lyra said, "but they left something behind, something the Celtrax are desperate to find. That's why they're hunting you. They think you can help them unlock it." "Unlock what?" Ethan demanded. "The core," Lyra replied. "The heart of this planet. It's a power source unlike anything in the galaxy. The Celtrax believe it can make them unstoppable, but it can also destroy them." A heavy silence filled the tunnel. The group stared at each other, the weight of Lyra's words sinking in. "Why are you telling us this?" Amelia asked, her voice suspicious. "Because I want to stop them," Lyra said simply. "And I can't do it alone." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "And why should we risk our lives for your cause?" "Because if the Celtrax get to the core," Lyra said, her voice grave, "no one in the galaxy will survive. Not humans. Not me. No one." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Ethan felt a familiar tension rising in his chest. This mission was supposed to be about survival. Nothing more, nothing less. But now, it seemed, they were being dragged into something far bigger than themselves. "Commander," Lyra said softly, "I know you don't trust me, but I need you to believe that I want to help. If you let me, I can lead you to the core, and to the answers you're searching for." Ethan stared into the glowing symbols on the walls, his mind racing. He didn't trust Lyra, but deep down, he knew she might be their only hope. "All right," he said finally. "We'll follow you. But if this is a trap—" "It's not," Lyra interrupted. "You'll see." As the group prepared to move deeper into the tunnel, a low rumble echoed in the distance. Ethan's jaw tightened. The Celtrax were close, and time was running out. Secrets in the dark. The air inside the tunnel was thick, heavy with a faint metallic scent that clung to their senses. The glowing symbols on the walls pulsed rhythmically, like the heartbeat of something ancient and alive. Ethan led the group cautiously, his rifle raised, and his eyes scanning for any sign of danger. Behind him, the survivors moved in tense silence, their footsteps echoing faintly in the cavernous space. "This place gives me the creeps," Marcus muttered, running a hand along the smooth surface of the tunnel wall. "It feels alive." "It is alive." Lyra's voice came through the comms, startling him. These tunnels were grown, not built. The civilization that created them was advanced in ways even the Celtrax couldn't understand. "How do you know so much about them?" Amelia asked, her tone sharp with suspicion. "I've studied them for years," Lyra replied. "The Celtrax have been trying to unlock the secrets of this planet for generations. I was tasked with researching these ruins before I defected." Ethan paused, his sharp gaze narrowing. "Defected? Why?" Lyra hesitated, her voice softer when she finally answered. "Because I couldn't be part of their destruction anymore. I saw what they did to worlds like yours, how they consumed everything in their path. I couldn't stand by and let it happen again." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford, yet every step deeper into the tunnel seemed to force them to rely on her guidance. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, and the group froze in awe. The space was enormous, the ceiling arcing so high it disappeared into darkness. Towering columns of crystal spiraled upward, casting shimmering blue light that reflected off pools of liquid scattered across the floor. Strange, plant-like structures grew along the edges of the chamber, their translucent leaves humming faintly. "What is this place?" Mia whispered, her voice tinged with wonder. "The heart of the tunnels," Lyra answered. "This is where the energy of the planet converges. These crystals store and distribute it, powering the life forms and ecosystems above." Ethan's instincts screamed at him to stay on high alert, but even he couldn't deny the strange beauty of the chamber. He moved cautiously, stepping around the pools of liquid. One of them bubbled softly, releasing faint tendrils of mist that curled toward the ceiling. Amelia crouched beside a pool, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. She dipped a small instrument into the liquid and examined the readings. This isn't water. It's some kind of biochemical solution. It's alive, like everything else here. That's why the Xeltrax want it," Lyra said. "They believe the key to unlocking the planet's core lies in these pools." Ethan's ears caught a faint sound in the distance, a low, steady hum that sent a shiver down his spine. He raised a hand, signaling the group to stop. "What is it?" Marcus whispered, gripping his own weapon tightly. "Quiet," Ethan hissed. He tilted his head, listening. The hum grew louder, more distinct, accompanied by faint clicking sounds. His stomach dropped. "They're here," he said grimly. "Xeltrax." Panic rippled through the group. Marcus muttered a curse under his breath, while Mia clung to Amelia, her wide eyes darting toward the shadows. "Stay calm," Ethan ordered. "Lyra, is there another way out of here?" "Yes," she replied quickly. "There's a secondary tunnel to your left, behind the largest crystal column. But you have to hurry. They'll sense your presence soon." Ethan gestured for the group to move. They sprinted toward the column, their footsteps splashing through the shallow pools. As they reached the tunnel entrance, a deafening roar echoed through the chamber, freezing them in their tracks. From the far side of the room, a group of Xeltrax emerged. Their sleek black bodies shimmered in the blue light, their yellow eyes glowing with predatory hunger. The largest of them stepped forward, its clawed hands flexing as it let out a guttural growl. "Run," Ethan shouted. The survivors bolted into the tunnel, the Xeltrax in pursuit. The narrow passage forced them into a single file, the walls pressing close on either side. Lyra's voice came through the comms, her tone urgent. "Keep going straight. There's a junction ahead. Take the right path. The left one leads to a dead end." Ethan fired his rifle over his shoulder, the sharp cracks echoing down the tunnel. The shots hit one of the Xeltrax, slowing it momentarily, but the others kept coming, their guttural roars growing louder. The group reached the junction and veered right, as Lyra had instructed. The tunnel sloped downward, and the ground grew slick with an unfamiliar substance. Marcus slipped, nearly falling, but Ethan grabbed his arm and hauled him back up. "Keep moving," Ethan barked. Ahead, the tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller but just as strange. The walls were lined with more of the glowing symbols, but these pulsed erratically, as though reacting to their presence. In the center of the room stood a pedestal made of the same crystalline material as the columns. "What is that?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "The key," Lyra said. "That pedestal controls the energy flow to the core. If the Xeltrax get to it." A deafening roar cut her off as the Xeltrax burst into the chamber. Ethan raised his rifle, his finger on the trigger. "Hold them off," he shouted. "Marcus, see if you can figure out how to activate that pedestal." The room erupted into chaos. Ethan fired round after round, each shot lighting up the chamber as the Xeltrax advanced. Marcus frantically examined the pedestal, his fingers trembling as he tried to decipher the glowing symbols. Come on," Marcus muttered, his voice frantic. "What do I press?" "Figure it out fast," Ethan yelled, dodging a swipe from Xeltrax's claw. As the tension reached its breaking point, a sudden surge of light filled the room. The pedestal activated, sending a wave of energy rippling outward. The Xeltrax froze, their bodies writhing as the energy seemed to repel them. Lyra's voice came through the comms, filled with relief. You did it. The pedestal will hold them back. For now. Ethan exhaled sharply, his body tense. For now isn't good enough, he muttered. We need a plan, and fast. The group regrouped, their breathing ragged but their resolve stronger. The secrets of the planet were starting to unfold, but they knew the worst was yet to come. The forbidden core. The tunnel felt colder as the group descended deeper into the planet. The faint glow of the walls seemed to dim, casting long shadows that stretched and danced with every step. A strange hum filled the air, a low vibration that resonated in their bones. Ethan kept his rifle raised, his eyes scanning every corner as they moved forward. The others followed closely behind, their exhaustion giving way to an uneasy determination. Are we close? Marcus asked, his voice echoing softly in the narrow passage. Very close. Lyra's voice came through the comms, steady but tense. The core is just ahead. But I need you to understand, this place isn't like anything you've encountered before. It will challenge you. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Lyra hesitated. The core has a presence. It can sense your intentions. If you mean harm, it will react badly. Amelia let out a shaky breath. Great. An ancient, sentient energy source that judges us, just what we needed. The tunnel suddenly widened, opening into a massive cavern that took their breath away. The core chamber was unlike anything they had seen. Towering crystal spires rose from the ground, glowing with a brilliant, pulsating light that seemed to illuminate the cavern from within. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, symbols and patterns that shifted and moved as if alive. At the center of the cavern was the core itself, a massive spherical object that hovered above the ground, rotating slowly. It radiated an ethereal light, its surface shimmering with a kaleidoscope of colors. The group stood in awe, momentarily forgetting the danger that had brought them there. Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened as he forced himself to focus. He couldn't afford to be distracted. What is this? Mia whispered, her voice filled with wonder. The heart of the planet, Lyra said softly. It's alive, in a way. The energy you see is the lifeblood of this world, sustaining everything from the jungle above to the ruins around us. Ethan stepped forward cautiously, his boots crunching against the crystalline ground. And the Xeltrax want to control it. Lyra's voice grew somber. They want to weaponize it. If they succeed, they'll have the power to destroy entire galaxies. Amelia knelt near one of the carvings, her fingers tracing the shifting patterns. These symbols, they're not just decorative. They're a language. It's like the core is trying to communicate. Not just trying, Lyra said. It is communicating. The core responds to intention and emotion. That's why it's so dangerous in the wrong hands. Marcus approached the core cautiously, his engineer's curiosity getting the better of him. How do we interact with it? Is there a control panel or something? No, Lyra replied. You don't control the core. You align with it. If it senses pure intentions, it will reveal its power. But if it senses greed or malice, she didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Ethan turned to face the group. We need to secure this place. The Xeltrax will come for it, and we can't let them get near it. Marcus, can you rig something to block the entrance? Marcus nodded, already pulling tools from his pack. I'll see what I can do. As Marcus began working, Ethan approached Lyra's voice coming through the comms. You've been here before, haven't you? Yes, Lyra admitted, but never this close. The Xeltrax kept me away from the core itself. They didn't trust me, even then. Ethan studied the core, its light reflecting in his eyes. Why didn't they trust you? Because I questioned them, Lyra said. I saw what they did to other planets, how they destroyed entire civilizations in their quest for power. I knew I couldn't be part of it anymore. Ethan didn't respond, but a part of him admired her courage. Turning against her own kind couldn't have been easy. Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the cavern. The glowing symbols on the walls flickered, and the core's light pulsed erratically. "What's happening?" Amelia asked, her voice rising in panic. "They're here," Lyra said urgently. "The cell tracks are trying to force their way into the cavern." Ethan snapped into action. "Marcus, how's that barricade coming?" "Almost done," Marcus shouted, his hands working frantically to assemble a makeshift barrier from the loose crystals and metal scraps he'd scavenged. The rumbling grew louder, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of cell track screeches. Ethan turned to the group. "Get ready. If they break through, we hold them here." Amelia and Mia armed themselves with the limited weapons they had, while Ethan took up a defensive position near the entrance. The tension in the air was palpable, the hum of the core growing louder as if responding to the impending danger. A deafening crash echoed through the cavern as the cell tracks broke through the tunnel. Their sleek black forms moved with terrifying speed, their glowing yellow eyes locked onto the group. Ethan fired the first shot, the crack of his rifle cutting through the chaos. "Hold the line," he shouted, his voice steady despite the chaos. The battle was fierce. The cell tracks were relentless, their claws slashing through the air as they charged. The survivors fought with everything they had, their desperation fueling their resolve. Ethan's leadership was unshakable, his commands keeping the group focused even as the odds seemed insurmountable. In the midst of the chaos, the core's light grew brighter, filling the cavern with an intense glow. The cell tracks hesitated, their movements faltering as if the core's energy was affecting them. "Lyra, what's happening?" Ethan demanded. "The core is reacting to the conflict," Lyra said. "It's trying to protect itself, but it needs someone to guide it." Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't hold off the cell tracks forever. Taking a deep breath, he stepped toward the core, his weapon lowered. "What are you doing?" Amelia shouted. "Ending this," Ethan said. He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from the core's shimmering surface. The moment his fingers touched it, a surge of energy shot through him, and the cavern was bathed in blinding light. The cell tracks let out agonized screeches, their forms dissolving into nothingness as the core unleashed its power. When the light faded, the cavern was silent. The group stared at Ethan, who stood beside the core, his face pale but determined. "It's over," he said quietly. "For now." But as the core's light dimmed, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that their fight was far from finished. Something about the core's energy lingered in his mind, a whisper of things yet to come. Love amid chaos. The cavern settled into an uneasy calm. The core's light pulsed softly now, as if it too was catching its breath. The group stood in a loose circle, their faces illuminated by the faint glow. Exhaustion etched lines across their features, but their eyes were wide with lingering adrenaline. Ethan leaned heavily against a crystalline column, his breaths coming in sharp gasps. The battle had taken its toll, but his mind raced with questions. He glanced at the core, still hovering in its mysterious way, and then at his team. For the first time in days, they weren't running for their lives, but the tension in the air was thicker than ever. "We need answers," Ethan said finally, his voice cutting through the silence, his gaze fixed on the communicator. "Lyra, we've followed you this far. Now it's time to tell us everything. No more half-truths." There was a pause before Lyra's voice came through, quieter than before. "You're right. You deserve the truth. But first, how are you holding up?" Ethan frowned, caught off guard by the question. "We're alive. That's all that matters." "No," Lyra said gently, her voice carrying an unexpected warmth. "That's not all that matters. You've been through hell, Ethan. You and your team. I know how it feels to carry the weight of survival, to bear the burden of keeping others safe." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't need sympathy." "It's not sympathy," Lyra replied. "It's understanding. I've been where you are. I've had to make impossible choices. I know what it does to you." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Amelia raised an eyebrow. Is this really the time for therapy? Lyra ignored her. The core didn't reject you, Ethan. That means something. It saw your intentions, your heart. It knows you're fighting for more than just survival. Ethan shifted uncomfortably under the weight of her words. He wasn't used to this kind of talk. He was a soldier, a leader. Emotions were a distraction. But something about Lyra's voice, her quiet sincerity, struck a chord deep within him. Why are you telling me this? He asked, his tone softer now. Because I see something in you, Lyra said. Something I thought I'd lost a long time ago. Hope. Ethan didn't know how to respond. The silence stretched until Marcus, still fidgeting with his tools, broke it. Look, this is all very touching, but we've got bigger problems. The cell tracks might be gone for now, but they're not going to give up. What's our next move? Lyra's voice grew serious again. You need to stabilize the core. Right now, it's vulnerable. If the cell tracks return with more forces, and they will, it won't be able to defend itself. And how do we stabilize it? Amelia asked, her scientific curiosity battling with her exhaustion. There's a control interface deeper within the cavern, Lyra explained. But it's not like any technology you've encountered. It requires a connection, emotional, mental. You have to align with the core's essence. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What does that mean exactly? It means it won't just test your intentions, Lyra said. It will test your soul. The group fell silent again. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. Mia, who had been quiet until now, spoke up hesitantly. And if we fail? Lyra's voice was soft. Then the core will protect itself by eliminating the threat. Ethan straightened, his resolve hardening. Then we don't fail. He looked at his team, his gaze steady and determined. We've come too far to turn back now. We'll face whatever's ahead. Together. As the group prepared to move deeper into the cavern, Lyra spoke again, her tone hesitant. Ethan, there's something you should know. What is it? He asked. I've been guiding you because I believe in what you're fighting for, she said. But I've also been watching you. You remind me of someone I once knew, someone I cared for deeply. Ethan froze, his eyes narrowing. What are you saying? I'm saying I see the same strength in you that I saw in him, Lyra admitted, and I'm afraid of what it will cost you. The room grew quiet again, the tension palpable. Ethan didn't respond, but his expression softened ever so slightly. He didn't want to admit it, but Lyra's words had reached a part of him he thought he buried long ago. Let's move, he said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was gruff, but there was a flicker of something else beneath it. Something vulnerable. As they ventured deeper into the cavern, the atmosphere grew heavier, the glow of the walls dimming to a faint shimmer. The symbols on the walls seemed to shift and writhe, as if reacting to their presence. The hum of the core grew louder, resonating in their chests. Ethan couldn't shake Lyra's words from his mind. For years, he'd kept his emotions locked away, focusing only on the mission, on survival. But now, in the depths of an alien world, with danger around every corner, he found himself questioning everything. Could he really lead his team through this? Could he trust Lyra, trust himself? And why, in the midst of all this chaos, did he feel a spark of something he hadn't felt in years? Something that terrified him more than the cell tracks ever could. Hope. The final stand. The air grew thicker as they ventured deeper into the cavern. The glow from the core seemed dimmer now, its energy flickering in uneven pulses like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Ethan led the group with his rifle at the ready, his jaw set in determination. Behind him, Marcus adjusted his makeshift barricade plans, muttering calculations under his breath, while Amelia and Mia exchanged nervous glances. The tension was palpable. Lyra, Ethan said through the comms, his voice sharp. If the core is this unstable, how much time do we have before the cell tracks return? Minutes, maybe less, Lyra replied. They'll bring reinforcements. They won't stop until they've taken the core or destroyed it trying. Ethan swore under his breath. Then we hold the line, whatever it takes. The group emerged into a smaller chamber, one that pulsed with faint, chaotic light. The walls here were lined with intricate carvings, but these symbols seemed fractured, as though they had been damaged over time. In the center stood a second pedestal, this one surrounded by jagged crystal shards. It thrummed with energy, but the rhythm was irregular, almost panicked. "This is the stabilization point," Lyra said. "It's connected to the core's energy flow. You'll need to realign it to keep the core stable." "And how do we do that?" Marcus asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "Twist a few knobs. Push some alien buttons." "It's not mechanical," Lyra explained. "It's intuitive. The person closest to the core's frequency, its essence, must establish the connection. The core will guide them." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "And if it decides we're not worthy?" "Then it'll defend itself," Lyra said grimly, with devastating force. Mia let out a shaky breath. "So, no pressure, right?" Before anyone could respond, a deafening roar echoed through the tunnels behind them. The sound was guttural, primal, and filled with malice. The Xeltrax were coming. Ethan's instincts kicked in immediately. Marcus, Amelia, set up defensive positions here. Mia, stay behind the barricade and provide cover fire if needed. I'll hold them off. "What about the core?" Amelia asked, her voice rising with urgency. "If we don't stabilize it—" "Focus on the fight first," Ethan interrupted. "We'll figure the rest out once we're not dead." The group scrambled into position as the rumbling grew louder. Moments later, the Xeltrax burst into the chamber, their sleek black forms glinting in the dim light. They moved with terrifying speed, their glowing yellow eyes locked onto the humans. Ethan fired the first shot, the sharp crack of his rifle echoing through the cavern. The blast hit one of the creatures square in the chest, sending it sprawling, but the others charged forward without hesitation. Marcus and Amelia joined in, their weapons blazing as the battle erupted. The Xeltrax were relentless. They moved like shadows, their claws slicing through the air as they closed the distance. Ethan fired shot after shot, his aim steady despite the chaos. He ducked under a swipe from one of the creatures, driving the butt of his rifle into its jaw before finishing it with a well-placed shot. Behind him, Mia's voice rang out. "They're flanking us." Ethan turned to see another group of Xeltrax emerging from a side tunnel. He cursed under his breath, his mind racing. They were outnumbered, and the core's unstable energy was making the entire cavern feel like it could collapse at any moment. "Lyra," he shouted into the comms, "we can't hold them off forever. What do we do?" "You have to stabilize the core now," Lyra replied urgently. "If you don't, it'll release a surge of energy that will wipe out everything in the cavern, including you." Ethan gritted his teeth. "We're a little busy right now." "I know," Lyra said, her voice softening. "But you're the only one who can do this, Ethan. The core chose you. Trust it, and trust yourself." Ethan hesitated, his rifle still raised. The Xeltrax were closing in, their snarls filling the air. He turned to Marcus and Amelia. "Hold the line. Whatever happens, don't let them get past you." "What are you planning?" Marcus asked, his eyes wide. "I'm going to finish this," Ethan said, his voice steady. He turned and sprinted toward the pedestal, dodging a clawed swipe from a Xeltrax as he went. The others covered him, their weapons firing in a desperate attempt to hold back the onslaught. Reaching the pedestal, Ethan placed his hands on the jagged surface. A surge of energy shot through him, and his vision blurred as the world around him seemed to fade away. He was no longer in the cavern, but standing in an endless void of light and sound. The core's presence was overwhelming, a mix of power and intelligence that pressed against his mind. "Who are you?" The core's voice echoed, not in words but in feelings. "What do you seek?" Ethan's throat tightened. He wasn't one for grand speeches or philosophical musings, but he spoke from the heart. I'm here to protect my team, to stop the Xeltrax, to do what's right. The core pulsed, its light growing brighter. Your intentions are noble, but can you withstand the cost? The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. Memories flashed through his mind. Faces of those he'd lost, choices he regretted, the weight of leadership that never seemed to lessen. He clenched his fists, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. I don't care about the cost. I'll do whatever it takes. The core pulsed again, and suddenly, the void shattered. Ethan was back in the cavern, the pedestal beneath his hands glowing with a blinding light. The Xeltrax froze mid-attack, their bodies writhing as the core's energy surged through the chamber. One by one, they disintegrated, their roars fading into silence. The cavern grew still. Ethan collapsed to his knees, his breath ragged. The pedestal's light dimmed, and the core's pulse returned to a steady, rhythmic glow. Is it over? Maya asked, her voice trembling. For now, Ethan said, pushing himself to his feet. He turned to face his team, his expression weary but resolute. But we're not done yet. We still have to make sure this never happens again. As the group regrouped, Ethan's thoughts drifted to Lyra. She'd been right about the core, and about him. But the battle wasn't over. Not yet. A new beginning. The cavern was eerily quiet now, the core's soft hum the only sound in the vast space. The survivors stood amidst the ruins of the battle, their bodies bruised and their minds weary. But they were alive. The air felt different, lighter, as though the weight of the Xeltrax's presence had been lifted. Yet, despite the calm, an unspoken tension lingered among them. Ethan stood near the core, his hands resting on his knees as he caught his breath. His gaze flicked to the glowing sphere, its light steady now, a stark contrast to the chaos it had caused moments ago. He knew the battle was far from over. The Xeltrax had retreated, but they would return. They always did. Ethan, Lyra's voice came through the comms, softer than before. You stabilized the core. I didn't think it was possible. He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. Neither did I. What happens now? There was a pause before she answered. Now you decide the future of this planet and the core. Ethan frowned, glancing at his team. Marcus was slumped against a crystalline wall, his makeshift barricade in pieces. Amelia and Mia were tending to each other's wounds, their exhaustion evident. They looked to him, their faces filled with trust and uncertainty. Decide the future, Ethan asked. What does that mean? The core is awake now, Lyra explained. It recognizes you as a protector. You have two choices. Leave it here and risk the Xeltrax finding a way to exploit it, or remove it from this planet entirely. Ethan's stomach tightened. Remove it? How? The core can bond with a host, Lyra said. If someone is willing to carry its energy, it will become dormant again, hidden, safe, but it's not without risks. Let me guess, Marcus muttered from the floor. The host might not survive. Lyra didn't deny it. The core's energy is immense. It could consume you. But it's the only way to ensure the Xeltrax can't get to it. Ethan's jaw clenched. He'd spent his entire life making tough decisions, but this one felt impossible. If he left the core, the Xeltrax would inevitably return, and the battle would start all over again. But if he took it, he wasn't sure he'd live to see his team safe. Commander, Maya said hesitantly, stepping closer. There has to be another way. We can fight them. We've done it before. We barely survived, Amelia countered, her voice sharp. We can't keep doing this. If Ethan can take the core, maybe it's worth the risk. Ethan turned to face them, his eyes scanning their faces. They were tired, battered, and scared. He wanted to protect them, but the cost was higher than anything he'd ever faced. Lyra, he said finally, if I take the core, what happens to this planet? The core will go dormant, she replied. The planet's natural ecosystems will remain, but the energy the Xeltrax are after will be gone. They'll have no reason to return. And what happens to me? There was another pause. I don't know, Lyra admitted, but I'll be with you, guiding you. If you survive, you'll become something more than human. The core's energy will change you. Ethan looked at the core again, its light reflecting in his eyes. He felt its presence, a quiet strength that seemed to call to him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. It was as if the core understood his struggle, his sacrifices. I'll do it, he said, his voice steady. Ethan, no. Mia exclaimed, tears welling in her eyes. There has to be another way. There isn't, he said gently. If we leave the core, the Xeltrax will come back, and next time, we might not survive. This is the only way to protect you, all of you. Amelia stepped forward, her expression conflicted. You don't have to do this alone. If there's even a chance it'll kill you. That's a chance I'm willing to take, Ethan interrupted. He looked at his team, his gaze firm but filled with emotion. You've trusted me this far. Trust me now. Reluctantly, they stepped back, giving him space. Ethan approached the core, its light growing brighter as he drew near. He reached out, his fingers hovering just above its surface. Ethan, Lyra said softly, thank you. For everything. He nodded, swallowing hard. Take care of them. As his hand touched the core, a surge of energy shot through him. The light enveloped his body, blinding and brilliant. He felt the power of the planet coursing through him, every cell in his body vibrating with its intensity. It was overwhelming, but he held on, his mind focused on one thing, protecting his team. The light grew brighter, forcing the others to shield their eyes. When it finally faded, Ethan was gone. In his place, the core floated silently, its light dim and steady. Mia fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. He's gone. No, Lyra said softly. He's not gone. He's with the core now, and he's still watching over you. The group stood in stunned silence, the weight of their loss heavy in the air. But as they looked at the core, a sense of peace washed over them. They knew Ethan had made the ultimate sacrifice to protect them and the galaxy. Let's get out of here, Amelia said finally, her voice trembling but determined. We owe it to him to survive. As they made their way out of the cavern, the core's light pulsed faintly, as if bidding them farewell. And somewhere, deep within its energy, Ethan's spirit burned brightly, a guardian for the ages. The battle was over, but their story had just begun.